You're back. We're back. I'm Phil. That's Sam.
Hey guys.
And what are we doing today?
We are doing more of the Napoleon series. So this is the Battle of Austerlitz, I think is how you say it.
Yeah, from 1805. I was going to say 1905, but a little bit
predates
there.
that.
Hard to believe that's 220 years ago.
Yeah. To me, it's just so crazy that we even have accounts of things that happened so long ago. Like, it's just wild to think about.
Well, good thing that we do.
I know.
And now we have YouTube that we can capture that.
Epic history to thank for that.
I mean, I guess if the grid goes down, then we're all kind of screwed. But
this is why you go back to books.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, though, that we don't put anything into books anymore, really. I mean, you know, stuff like this, like we're getting to relive it and go through the history of it. And it's been transferred from books to digital media. And hopefully we transfer it back to books again, right? So that it all doesn't go amiss. But anyways, coming into Napoleonic Wars here. This is our second from Napoleon. We did the first one, 1792, I think that one was.
Yeah, that was like when he was first getting recruited into everything and how he like really used his tactical skills and strategic skills to dominate and make a name for himself.
Unexpected that he was going to do anything at all and ended up being the savior of that war, essentially. So that's how he started. Now,
was he just like passing by and they were like, hey, you.
Yeah, I think that's the story because he had written a book and he had some political acumen. And anyways, so I think this is about 13 years later that we're coming to his second battle now, which seems like a large gap. So maybe we'll hopefully touch on why that was. But as usual, guys, thank you for all the support. If you enjoy the video, hit that like button, leave us a comment. Let us know if there's anything else you want to see. We do music, comedy, sports, and history. We'll have all this stuff up in a playlist. We got we did Alexander the Great as well. So we'd love to have you on this journey that we're on with history, but not just history, music, comedy, and sports as well. All right, ready to get into Napoleon?
Let's do it.
Let's go.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration.
Epic History.
Supported by our sponsor, The
Fire
Great
videos.
Courses Plus. In December 1804, in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of the French. Europe had never seen such a sudden and dramatic rise to power. A son of impoverished Corsican nobility to military dictator of France in little more than 10 years.
That's wild.
Revolution and war had cleared Napoleon's path to the throne. War would dominate his 10-year reign. A conflict unprecedented in history that would leave millions dead and a continent in turmoil. Eight months after Napoleon's coronation, the French Empire and its Spanish ally were at war with Britain, and Napoleon had assembled an army of 180,000 men along the Channel coast. But as long as the British...
In the last video, wasn't Spain aligned with Great Britain?
Yeah, and then they were against the French.
Yeah, so in this one they just said that France is now aligned with the Spanish and not with Great Britain any longer. And we also didn't get any backstory as to how Napoleon got to this point where, you know, he's now the emperor.
Dive in it.
So I guess maybe we'll have to go back and check out another video related to that at some point.
80,000 men along the Channel coast. But as long as the British Royal Navy ruled the seas, invasion was impossible. But nor could Britain challenge France on land. And so British Prime Minister William Pitt tried to build a European coalition against Napoleon, using diplomacy and gold.
Not a bad idea.
Britain would prove Napoleon's most steadfast enemy, and its press delighted in relentless mockery of the French emperor. Britain and France were old rivals in Europe and overseas. But now, Pitt feared Napoleon's conquests had made France too powerful. The French emperor had to be defeated, and Europe's balance of power restored if there was ever to be lasting peace.
Old school cartoons.
Pitt found willing allies in Europe, among monarchs who despised Napoleon as a product of the French Revolution and a dangerous threat to the existing order. Austria harboured the deepest grievances, having seen her influence in Germany and Italy steadily eroded by French victories. The final straw came in May 1804, when Napoleon had also crowned himself King of Italy in Milan.
King of Italy as well.
Austria, Russia, Sweden and Naples joined Britain in an alliance known as the Third Coalition, and devised an ambitious plan for a series of joint offensives against France. The main attack would be made by a combined Austro-Russian army, advancing across the Rhine into France. But Napoleon got word of their plans, and reacted with typical speed and decision. He was determined to strike first, before the Allies could join forces, and ordered his army, now renamed La Grande Armée, to march to the River Rhine. His target was the Austrian army of General Mack, which had made a premature advance against Bavaria, a French ally, and was now dangerously isolated from the other Allied armies. Napoleon ordered Marshal Murat, his famously flamboyant cavalry commander, to make feint attacks through the Black Forest, while the rest of his army, advancing at speed, enveloped Mack's army from the north. That summer, Napoleon's Grande Armée was at its most formidable. Well-trained, highly motivated, its regiments at full strength. What's more, it had been newly reorganized according to the corps system, later imitated by virtually every army in the world. Each corps, commanded by a marshal, was a mini-army of 15,000 to 30,000 soldiers, with its own infantry, cavalry, artillery and supporting arms, such as reconnaissance, engineers and transport. This meant each corps could march and fight for a limited time independently, allowing Napoleon to break with the old doctrine of keeping his army concentrated and advance with his corps widely dispersed. This helped to
Interesting. That's like it seems like an evolution of war tactics in general. You know, we've seen obviously Alexander the Great, and even in that first Napoleon video where everybody was kind of combined and confined to one area, and this seems like the first time, or maybe it's not the first time, but he's using these tactics which are innovative to spread them out but not reduce the effectiveness and capabilities of them.
Yeah, for sure, which you obviously, like they said, most armies adopted this later on. Like you think of like World War I and World War II, and like this is exactly what they did, right? Like you had like numbered corps and battalions and all that kind of stuff. And
so we have the name Grande Armée,
the big army. Intimidation tactics.
Simple name in English terms sounds so fantastic in the French language. Yeah. You've got, you know, what you alluded to just a moment ago in the World War. We've done obviously World War I and World War II on the channel, and this sounds like it's a world war, and to some extent the way it's starting to percolate, right?
Lots of allies uniting, trying to come against, and you know, I feel like whether we watch another video or you guys provide some insight, but I think it'd be really interesting also to figure out what happened in that time period in between, because it's like you said, he went from, you know, gaining lots of recognition from that last battle that we watched in the video to now he's like crowned himself King of France and King of Italy. So it's like, that's a big step up.
And they were just saying that they had such a formidable army and military presence at that point. That would have taken time. I imagine he probably trained them and built them in a certain way. So anyways, let's keep it going.
The old doctrine of keeping his army concentrated and advance with his corps widely dispersed. This helped to disguise his real objective and increased movement speed, because the army could advance along multiple roads and live off the land, taking its supplies from scattered villages, rather than relying on slow-moving supply wagons.
For sure.
When the enemy's main force was located, the army could quickly concentrate for battle. This is how Napoleon's army was able to move at a speed that often surprised and disorientated his enemies.
Okay.
Mack didn't realize the danger he was in until it was too late. Napoleon's fast-moving corps crossed the Danube behind him and surrounded his army. Mack launched a series of poorly coordinated counterattacks, but despite some desperate fighting, the Austrians couldn't break out of the trap. Mack hoped that Kutuzov's Russian army could arrive in time to save him, but the Russians were still 160 miles away. And so, at Ulm, on the 19th of October, just 6 weeks into the war, Mack surrendered his army to Napoleon. The French took nearly 60,000 Austrian prisoners.
Wow.
And Napoleon had struck his first devastating blow against the coalition. Russian General Mikhail Kutuzov was an experienced and wary commander, more cautious than Mack. His army was exhausted after its 900-mile march from Russia.
Oh my gosh.
But hearing of the Austrians' surrender at Ulm, and knowing he wasn't strong enough to face Napoleon alone, he immediately ordered a retreat. Napoleon pursued. The Russians fought several sharp rearguard actions, but could not save the Austrian capital, Vienna, which the French occupied on the 12th of October.
Wow.
Kutuzov slipped away to Olmütz in today's Czech Republic, where he was joined by reinforcements, as well as Emperor Alexander of Russia and Emperor Francis of Austria in person. Napoleon was furious that Kutuzov had escaped. By now his army was also exhausted, and far from home with winter approaching. He needed to force a decisive battle quickly. Fortunately for him, the overconfident 27-year-old Russian emperor sought the glory of battle, overriding the concerns of his veteran commander, General Kutuzov. With the Allied army closing in, Napoleon ordered his corps to rapidly concentrate on a battlefield he had carefully selected, near the town of Austerlitz. Napoleon...
So it's interesting, I was thinking about this when they started talking about those tactics of the speed that Napoleon was using, and he must have really mapped out and been well aware of the location, the geographical location, the landscapes. He must have put some emphasis on that to know where they could go, when they could go, how quickly they could do these things, and being able to disperse and then come together really quickly without weakening themselves. He must have put a lot of emphasis on the tactics of movement, and we're kind of seeing that take place here in this. It sounds like he's really kind of fine-tuning, okay, this is the way we have to approach it based on what location we're in.
Yeah, and I was thinking about when they were saying too how his tactics often disoriented the other side, and like they weren't expecting how impactful it would be. Because if you think about it, in these times, the only way you'd be able to figure out like what's coming is to go and scout, right? To go scout like how many people do they have, what locations are they in. So if you're all spread out, chances are they're not going to know the full impact of you, right? So when you do all come together and then strike, they're like probably like, whoa, there's way more people than we initially thought, right?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of emphasis on reconnaissance and understanding what to expect, and then once you have that information, you can close that gap of the expectations of how things are going to play out, because you have an inside track to understanding the movements, the mechanisms that could be utilized to have an advantage, right? Because you can tip the scales on something in this time anyways, as simple as the landscape being on a hill versus not.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And so I'm just it's crazy as you go back in time and you see these minor differences that you wouldn't think of today, and they played such a huge role in because you just said scouting at that point,
Mm-hmm.
at the point in time. You don't even think about that today because you have access to GPS and everything, right?
And then heat sensors and all that kind of stuff, right? But even from in all the other war videos that we've done, numbers play a really big role in how some of these battles turn out, right? And it's if you're scouting and they said each one of these corps were around 20 to 30,000 people, it's if you go out and you see 3 of those groups and you're like, oh, they have 60,000 people, but there's actually 6 more groups scattered out there that you don't even know are there, and then they all come together, you're like, okay, we were expecting maybe 100,000 people, and now there's 300,000 people.
Yeah, the intel has to be top notch, right?
Yeah.
Near the town of Austerlitz. Napoleon oversaw the dispositions of his army late into the night, then grabbed a few hours' sleep beside a campfire. Dawn would mark the first anniversary of his coronation as emperor, and promised a battle that would make or break his young empire.
Let us finish this war with a thunderclap. Sounds like somebody would say it today.
The morning of the 2nd of December 1805 was cold and bright with a heavy mist. 2 armies of near equal size faced each other across a 7-mile-wide battlefield. But the Allies held the high ground of the Pratzen heights, while French Third Corps under Marshal Davout was still marching to the battlefield. Seeing Napoleon's thinly stretched right flank, the Allies planned a large-scale attack from the Pratzen heights to steamroller the French right, before swinging round to envelop Napoleon's army.
Makes sense.
Little did they know, Napoleon was counting on his weak right wing luring the Allies into just such a move.
With the other,
whereupon he would launch his own attack on the Pratzen heights to cut the Allied army in half. His bold plan relied on his correct prediction of Allied movements, the speedy arrival of Davout's Third Corps on his right, and a perfectly timed counterattack. The battle began around 7 a.m. as Austrian troops of General Kienmayer's advance guard clashed with French troops defending the village of Telnitz. In the face of overwhelming odds, the French fought stubbornly and bravely, but gradually they were forced back. But the Allies, instead of carrying out their great enveloping attack, did nothing. The morning mist and the late arrival of orders had led to confusion and delay, and it was another hour before the first 3 Allied columns were on the move. Soon, fierce fighting erupted around Sokolnitz village and castle. Marshal Davout's corps, which had just force-marched 70 miles in 2 days, now arrived to strengthen the French right wing. Around 9 a.m., his lead infantry brigade appeared suddenly through the mist and retook Telnitz, before being driven back in turn by Austrian hussars. 2 more of Davout's brigades reinforced French troops at Sokolnitz. As the mist began to clear, Napoleon saw that, as he'd hoped, the Allied left was moving off the Pratzen heights, and he ordered Marshal Soult's 4th Corps to begin its attack. To the alarm of Allied commanders, 2 French infantry divisions, until now hidden by the mist, were suddenly seen advancing straight towards the Allied centre.
Oh shit.
General Kutuzov was forced to hurriedly organize a defense of the heights, using troops of 4 column. 2 hours of bloody fighting followed. Musket fire was so rapid and furious that both sides were soon low on ammunition and turned to the bayonet. By 11 a.m, the French, with the advantage in training and discipline, had secured the heights and driven a deep wedge into the Allied position. To the north, a giant cavalry battle developed. While a Russian force from General Bagration's advance guard captured the village of Austerlitz, before it was halted by cannon fire from the Santon Hill. A decisive charge by 6 regiments of French heavy cavalry finally drove back the Allies, allowing Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps to move forward and seize Blasowitz and Krug.
This is wild, because you're just seeing what, at this moment anyways, looks like complete dominance by the French here in terms of their tactics and their positioning, and like never for a second has it looked in doubt that they were going to win this. They haven't been weakened at all, where you're seeing many instances of the Allied brigade, you know, they've made a mistake because of the mist, or they have, you know, it's not been timely in providing reinforcements, or they've gotten out of structure in terms of their formation, or, you know, they've panicked because they didn't realize there was more men than they had anticipated, right? And we talked about the difference of the weather playing a role in the midst. You can't predict that, right?
Yeah, no, you have no idea. You're just at the mercy of whatever happens.
But it sounds like, I mean, you know, obviously this is interpretation on my part, but it sounds like the mist was used by Napoleon and the tactics to use it as camouflage, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's like, you know, if you know how to use it and you're being smart and you're working that to your advantage, right? Opposed to looking at it as a hindrance. I think a perspective plays a lot into this, right? Like looking at, I think a lot of, you know, today's society, you'd be like use the analogy like glass half full or glass half empty. You've taken the glass half full approach of like, how can I use this mist, instead of being like, oh, the mist is going to ruin everything. But it was also so interesting to me because they have such specific details, like at 11 a.m. by 11 a.m. this had happened, and it's like, for me, I feel like it's just so crazy how they would have pieced all this together like historians, because they probably would have had to take so many different accounts from different people. And like at this time, right, like you would have had to take so many different accounts of like what happened in this area, what happened in this area, what this group of people were doing, what this group of people were doing, and to bring all that together to be able to bring the story full circle. And it's just so crazy how much time probably has gone into piecing all of this together.
For sure. I think there's a lot of stuff, like you said, that you would need to piece together. You could probably look at the terrain. You could probably look at anything that was left over, you know, after the fact. Obviously, we're talking years later, but there's still going to be artifacts that you're going to be able to come across. And then you're going to have historical accounts, but you're also probably going to have, I think we said this in the last video, that somebody like Napoleon seemed to be very well aware of his legacy. And so, or maybe that was in Alexander the Great, we were talking about that. But
I think we had read, or they had said in the last one, that he kept a journal or something too. Yeah.
So what I was just going to say is I wouldn't be surprised if there's people that they had as a part of these conflicts that were only there to take down and document what was going on. And of course, you know, they may go back and change things so it represents them in a, you know, fonder light.
I'm sure there's lots of fact checking that needed to be done.
As they always say, you know, the winners are the ones that write history, right? So, but, you know, and similar to, you know, when you have medics, right? It's like kind of a known expectation that the medics are going to be there, and people don't target the medics because they know that they're supposed to take care of injured people. And oftentimes medics would take care of people on both sides, right? So maybe that would be a similar instance where there would be people there that would be assigned and employed to just go in and, you know, write about all this stuff. And, you know, they wouldn't go and torch them, kill them, because they know that they're not part of the military conflict. So
it's just interesting listening to this, right? Because it almost sounds like somebody was just like hovering in a helicopter documenting everything that was taking place, but obviously it wasn't that easy, right? And you kind of forget that, like how much has gone into this. Yeah,
that's why it's so cool to see these videos, so we can see the intricate details. But anyways, let's keep it going. We'll wrap things up with some final thoughts.
Finally drove back the Allies, allowing Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps to move forward and seize Blasowitz and Krug. Now, Grand Duke Constantine, commanding the Russian Imperial Guard, led forward this last Allied reserve in a desperate bid to reclaim the Pratzen Heights. A battalion of the French 4th Line Regiment was charged down by Russian Guard cavalry, losing its Eagle standard in bloody fighting. Napoleon, who'd moved up to the heights, sent in his own Guard cavalry. In this grim melee between the elite horsemen of both armies, the French finally prevailed. Napoleon had broken the Allied centre. Now, to close the trap on the Allied left wing, still locked in heavy fighting around Sokolnitz. Around 2 p.m, Napoleon ordered 4 divisions to swing south and cut off their retreat. General Buxhowden, commanding the Allied left, only now saw the danger he was in. Attacked from 3 sides, the only escape was south. Many of his troops were forced to flee across frozen ponds. French artillery opened fire, trying to smash the ice with their cannonballs.
Wow.
About 200 men and dozens of horses drowned in the freezing water. But not the many thousands of Napoleon's propaganda. The French Emperor had won a brilliant victory. His army had taken more than 10,000 prisoners and captured 45 enemy standards. Thousands of dead and wounded of all sides littered the battlefield. Many left untended for days. The Battle of the Three Emperors, as it became known, was a crushing blow to the Third Coalition. As Russian forces retreated back to Russia, Francis I of Austria was forced to accept a humiliating settlement with France, agreeing to pay a 40 million franc indemnity and give up more territory in exchange for peace. But meanwhile, news had reached Napoleon of a disastrous Franco-Spanish defeat at sea off Cape Trafalgar. British Admiral Lord Nelson, at the cost of his own life, had masterminded a victory so complete that it ensured British naval dominance, not just for the rest of the war, but for the next 100 years.
Wow.
Britain, master of the sea. Napoleon, unbeatable on land. The whale and the elephant, neither able to challenge the other in its own domain. When William Pitt received news of Napoleon's victory at Austerlitz, he's supposed to have said, "Roll up that map of Europe, it will not be wanted these 10 years." A month later, Pitt was dead. But his warning that Europe faced another 10 years of war and upheaval was to prove prophetic.
Wow.
Thanks to fellow YouTube channel History March for creating the battle map and animations. And of course to all our Patreon supporters for making
Epic History, as usual, coming with the visuals and all the facts that you talked about. And interesting because we talked about, rewriting history, and they had alluded to that there when they said Napoleon's propaganda alluded to thousands of people perishing in the lake there in the river, and it was actually, not as nearly as much as what he had said.
Yeah, he probably boasted himself up a little bit time and on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, it's the grandioso idea of who you are as a leader. Obviously, we've seen, even with Alexander the Great, if you're built up to that stature, people are going to fall in line and follow you more, right? So
yeah, I think also too, right? Like, it's been proven time and time again that the more successful you become as a conqueror or in battle, the more I think your ego grows a little bit, and I think the more that you're probably reaching for, like spreading your conquest, you're talking yourself up, and you're probably reaching a little bit in terms of the facts of what's actually happening.
Yeah, so I mean, any thoughts for you on this Battle of Austerlitz in 1805? Any closing thoughts that you had?
I think the one thing that's just really interesting to me is obviously these people who are in leadership positions and successful in leadership positions have a really strong strategic component to their brain and how they operate. I think that was proven obviously with Alexander the Great, and now with Napoleon. It's like, you can be brute and have strength, but if you don't have strategy, like, you're not going to get as far. And I think that that's been very evident with both of them. Well, obviously Alexander the Great, but so far with Napoleon.
Well, so far we've only got into our second one from him, but But
you can just tell, like you said before, though, right? He's taking into account all factors and using what he can to his advantage, whether it's terrain, whether it's positioning, whether it's, innovative new techniques.
I think also one aspect not to overlook when you're getting this information is that brief mention of they had traveled, I think it was 90 miles in 2 days. And that's before they even got to the battle.
I was like, I wonder how many steps they're getting in there.
It's crazy. I mean, people can't even do that today. And these guys literally walked that far just to go into battle.
I know. I walk like 5 miles in a day, and I'm like, okay, I'm tired. That was a lot today.
90 miles. That's incredible. I think it was 90 miles.
Yes, they said.
And that's incredible.
I think they said over 2 days.
And, you're literally rushing to get there.
And no rest, just straight into battle.
Yeah, and to save Napoleon's ass, basically. Mm-hmm. You're just rushing to get there, and then you get into battle, and it's like battle itself obviously is completely taxing on your mental state, your physical state, but knowing in advance that's where you're going, and then doing the physical preparation to get there, that just blows my mind. And that's something that's so easily overlooked. I feel like the time frame that we're in, it's not like you just get in a car and you go somewhere.
No, and
they drop you off in a plane, it's like,
and not to mention they're in the middle of a war, so like sleeping conditions, food conditions, like God only knows what that was like. So it's like, it's not like you're like getting a full 8 hours sleep in your comfy bed and eating a good meal and then going off to battle.
Yeah, like they said, Napoleon slept a couple hours and then he was ready for battle. And
it's crazy.
We got to get our 7-8 hours sleep so we can make sure we do our YouTube videos. Right?
So I'm not grumpy.
But then you even had the 900 miles. I think they said that it was Russia that had traveled to get there for the war. It's so crazy.
Literally just for them to be like, oh, we didn't get here in time, so now we're going to turn around and go back.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways.
It's wild.
That's what's so interesting about these videos and these facts. It's just, puts it into context how different the life that we live today is. And
I think it's also just proof, though, that you're physically capable of a lot more than you think that you are, and a lot of the time our barrier to being able to do things physically is our mental state.
And if you don't know any other way of life, though, I think that's important because they had no alternative of getting anywhere, and getting anywhere any other way than
walking,
heel and toe.
Yeah, for
right.
Sure.
And when you don't have an alternative, you just make do. Right. Anyways, enough with this video. We've got more Napoleon videos to do, and hopefully you would like to come check those out with us and hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this one. Leave us a comment and give us insights on anything that we discussed or anything we may have missed. We appreciate learning, appreciate all your comments, appreciate if you just come through to hang with us on this video. But other than that, have a great day. We'll see you in our next one.
Thanks for watching, guys.